everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Ilya Somin, law professor at George Mason University. Professor Somin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Somin, I'm grateful for you coming on because you have joined me a few times in the past couple of months to talk about the lawsuit that you and the Liberty Justice Center filed against President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. And this just celebrated another legal win, this time in an appeals court. In a 7-4 ruling, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit said that President Trump overstepped his presidential authority by invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs. So to start off the conversation, what's your reaction to the ruling?
Well, of course, we're very happy that the court ruled the way it did and recognized that this was an illegal usurpation of congressional power and not something that the president can do on his own. The Constitution gives the power to impose tariffs and other taxes to Congress, not to the president. And I think the court rightly concluded here that he simply can't impose these massive tariffs without far more in the way of clear congressional authorization.
I want to talk about what exactly that ruling said, because the ruling said imposing tariff policy is, quote, vested exclusively in the legislative branch and a, quote, core congressional power. The dissenting judges, however, wrote this, quote, IEEPA's authorization of presidential action in this realm is not an unconstitutional delegation of legislative authority under the Supreme Court's decisions, which have upheld broad grants of authority, including tariffing authority in this foreign affairs related area. What do you make of what the dissenting judges wrote? Because this was a 7-4 ruling.
Yeah, so obviously it's no surprise that I might disagree with some things that the dissenting judges wrote, but basically it comes down to this, that under the president's interpretation of this law, he would have virtually unlimited power to impose any tariffs he wants at any time, for any reason, in any amount, for as long as he wants. And if anything is an unconstitutional delegation of legislative power to Congress, then it's something like this, a virtually unlimited delegation of what the majority rightly said is a core congressional power. Moreover, this is a law that doesn't even mention the word tariffs or a synonym like imposts or duties. It just says that under this law, there is sometimes a power to, quote unquote, regulate certain kinds of international transactions. As the majority explains, regulation and taxation are two distinct powers historically, and we cannot assume that the word regulate, impose includes a power to tax, and certainly not one that is on this gigantic scale where you would have the highest tariffs since those that helped deepen and cause the Great Depression.
That's what the judges who ruled in your favor said, that the word tariffs, or even a synonym of the word tariffs, is not mentioned anywhere in IEEPA. And you represent in the lawsuit 5 small businesses who would be impacted by tariffs. So A, what has their reaction been to this ruling? And B, how have they been impacted by tariffs so far?
So like with a lot of small businesses and other businesses throughout the United States, obviously the impact has been very painful and difficult. Many American businesses get goods from abroad that they need to do their work, inputs for production, goods and so forth, which are often either just not available in the United States or only available at much higher cost or lower quality. So these tariffs, if allowed to stay in place, would be very damaging to the American economy, to businesses, and also to consumers who end up having to pay higher prices.
President Trump, it's probably no surprise to you, was not happy with this ruling. I want to read something that he posted in part on Truth Social. Quote, the USA will no longer tolerate enormous trade deficits and unfair tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers imposed by other countries, friend or foe, that undermine our manufacturers, farmers, and everyone else. If allowed to stand, this decision would literally destroy the United States of America. At the start of this Labor Day weekend, we should all remember that tariffs are the best tool to help our workers and support companies that produce great made in America products. What do you make of his reaction there?
Well, I guess I could make the obvious point that the United States very much existed before these tariffs, were put in place, and would certainly continue to exist without them. Moreover, the United States would be better off without them because economists estimate that if these tariffs remain in place, they would greatly reduce economic growth, raise prices for consumers, and reduce incomes for far more workers than they might help. That's actually just fairly basic economics 101.
And this ruling does not go into effect until October 14th. And President Trump himself has indicated that he's taking this to the Supreme Court. How are you gearing up for that fight?
So obviously, if the case does go to the Supreme Court, we don't yet know for sure whether it will or not. But if it does, we will be prepared to defend our cause as we have so far.
Are you concerned, though, about that Supreme Court fight? Because President Trump nominated 3 of those justices that now serve on the court, and it's a conservative-leaning court.
So obviously, I can't know for sure what the Supreme Court justices might do. All I will say is that many of our arguments rely on doctrines that have been pioneered and defended by conservative Supreme Court justices as much as liberal ones. We've talked about the principle of non-delegation before, limits on the extent to which Congress can delegate executive powers to president. If anything violates that, it's a virtually unlimited delegation of the kind that's being claimed here. And similarly, the Federal Circuit based this decision in part on the major questions doctrine, which says that if the executive is claiming that a power has been delegated to them, which enables them to decide large-scale, social or economic issues, then at the very least, there has to be a clear delegation as opposed to something that's ambiguous. And here, it's difficult to think of a more major question than this one when we're talking about trillions of dollars in new taxes imposed on the American people, massive damage to the economy, and so forth. So again, I can't know whether the Supreme Court will take the case or what they will do if they were to take it, but I think we have very compelling arguments that can appeal to conservative and liberal jurists alike.
And as of now, these tariffs are in effect, like we said, until about mid-October. What do you think this fight, this legal challenge, and your legal win so far means for President Trump's tariff policy overall?
So we'll see. Obviously, we'll see if the case goes to the Supreme Court and what it decides. But we hope if we continue to win that these tariffs will be removed and they could only be put back in place if Congress were to enact them, which is the branch of government that is supposed to have the power over these sorts of issues.
And since President Trump's tariffs took place in April, the United States brought in around $96 billion worth of revenue from these tariffs. If this ruling is upheld, where does all that money go? Is it disseminated back to these businesses? What does that really look like?
So there might be a complicated process at that point, and I admit I'm not fully expert in how that process works. I'm on the case because of my expertise in certain constitutional law issues and related questions. But my understanding would be that if the courts continue to hold that these tariffs are illegal, then sooner or later the tariffs that were previously paid and collected illegally would have to be repaid and given back to those who paid them.
And what's next for this lawsuit? What are the next steps here? Because I know that you could be potentially gearing up for a Supreme Court fight, but what are you specifically doing next?
So at this point, I'm not doing much of anything other than waiting to see if the administration does indeed ask the Supreme Court to take the case, and then whether the Supreme Court will in fact take it. If they do, then of course we will be ready to defend our case.
And I know from someone with a perspective, a legal perspective, someone who's an expert on the Constitution, especially in this realm, what do you think about President Trump's trade policy then from that lens? If this is upheld, does his entire trade policy unravel? I mean, what's really left of that?
So that's more a question for him than perhaps for me, but obviously the implication would be that if you want to impose massive new tariffs and taxes, you have to go through the branch of government which has the power to do that, which is Congress. You can't just do it on one person's whim.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for, Professor Somin. I appreciate you coming on and breaking it down with me. Thank you so much for joining me. And when or if we see this reach the Supreme Court, I hope you can come back on and discuss it then. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.